In the storage wing of the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, in the section that still has not been fully recatalogued since the 2003 looting, there is a clay tablet roughly the size of an adult male's palm. Catalog number IM 124403. It was recovered from the ruins of a temple complex at Nippur during a joint Iraqi-American expedition in 1972, 1 year before the political situation in the region made further excavation impossible. The tablet was classified as a ritual fragment, presumably an incantation, and placed on a shelf where it remained for over 3 decades. The standard catalog entry describes it as Nam-shub fragment, Old Babylonian copy, partial preservation. Nam-shub in the Sumerian tradition belongs to a category of texts that modern linguistics cannot classify with confidence, because the Sumerians themselves described Nam-shub as words that, when spoken aloud, alter physical reality. Not metaphorically, not in a spiritual sense. The Sumerian language had distinct terms for prayer, for supplication, for ritual address. Nam-shub did not belong to any of those categories. It was classified in their own administrative vocabulary as a tool, filed alongside plows, bronze chisels, and irrigation channels. In 2004, Iraqi epigraphist Tariq al-Janabi gained access to the tablet as part of a post-war recataloguing program. He expected a standard ritual text. What he found instead was a description of an acoustic procedure. The text contained 3 Sumerian compound words that do not appear in any other known cuneiform document out of more than 100,000 catalog tablets. Each of these words described a specific sound frequency, not in hertz, but through physical parameters: the length of a bronze string, the diameter of a ceramic resonator, and the distance between the sound source and the human body. Al-Janabi translated the first 2 columns in a single evening. The third column, the one on the reverse side of the tablet, took him 4 days, because the third column described what happens to the human body when all 3 frequencies sound simultaneously. And the first thing that stops is the heart. To understand why IM 124403 is not just another ritual fragment, you need to understand how Sumerian acoustic terminology works. The Sumerians had an extensive vocabulary for sound. They documented musical scales, described the tuning of lyres and harps with mathematical precision that musicologists did not rediscover until the Renaissance. The oldest known musical notation in human history is Sumerian. These were not people banging drums around a fire. These were acousticians working within a systematic framework. But IM 124403 does not use standard Sumerian musical vocabulary. The 3 compound words on the tablet, which Al-Janabi transliterated as Gunir Sag, Gunir Bar, and Gunir Ush, all share the same root. Gu means voice or sound. Nir means authority or command. The third element changes. Sag means head. Bar means outside or body surface. Ush means death. Sound that commands the head, sound that commands the body, sound that commands death. These are not poetic constructions. In Sumerian administrative language, the near prefix was used exclusively for terms denoting direct mechanical causation. A near designation meant the thing produced a measurable, repeatable physical effect. No surviving hymn contains it. No mythological text uses it. The near prefix shows up in engineering records, in irrigation manuals, in descriptions of how lever mechanisms operated. Whoever wrote IM 124403 was not composing poetry. They were documenting a technology. And the 3 frequencies they documented were specifications. Al-Janabi recognized the near construction immediately. He had spent his career working with Sumerian administrative texts. He knew that when a scribe used near, the text was describing something that worked reliably, predictably, and physically. If you are following these investigations, the tablets that don't fit, the records that get sealed, the patterns that mainstream archaeology cannot explain, subscribe now. We publish a new case every week. And this one is about to get much worse. The question was, what kind of technology a Bronze Age civilization could have developed that used sound to produce measurable effects on the human body? The answer was already sitting in classified military research files in 3 different countries. The first column of IM 124403 describes the construction of 3 instruments, not musical instruments. The tablet uses the term gish Nam-shub, wood tool of the Nam-shub, a purpose-built device designed to produce a specific acoustic effect. The first instrument is a bronze string stretched across a cedar frame. The tablet gives the string length as 4 cubits, approximately 207 centimeters. When Al-Janabi consulted with acoustician Dr. Hannah Mayer at the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, Mayer calculated that a bronze string of that length and approximate gauge would produce a fundamental frequency between 17 and 19 Hz, below the threshold of human hearing, infrasound. The second instrument is a ceramic vessel, a resonator with a specific interior diameter. The frequency it produces corresponds to approximately 7 Hz, within the range that modern research has identified as the resonant frequency of human internal organs. The third instrument changes everything. It is not a string or a resonator, but a stone chamber of specific dimensions into which both sounds are directed simultaneously. The chamber is lined with what the text calls stones that answer, a term Mayer suggested could describe piezoelectric minerals, crystals that produce electrical charges when subjected to mechanical stress, including sound vibration. When 17 Hz and 7 Hz are introduced into a chamber lined with piezoelectric crystals, the resulting interference pattern produces a third frequency, not additive, combinatorial. In a resonant chamber, 2 frequencies produce sum and difference tones, beat frequencies, and in the presence of piezoelectric materials, electromagnetic pulse effects. The third frequency, Gunarush, the sound that commands death, is not produced by an instrument. It is produced by the interaction of the first 2 sounds with the crystalline structure of the chamber itself. And the frequency that emerges sits at approximately 1.2 Hz. Just over 1 cycle per second. The resting frequency of the human heart. And here is where it stops being ancient history and starts being something else entirely. Here is where the ancient text intersects with research that most people have never heard of, because it was never meant to be public. In 1998, Vic Tandy, an engineer at Coventry University in England, published a paper in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research titled "The Ghost in the Machine." It was not about ghosts, it was about infrasound. Tandy discovered that a newly installed extractor fan was producing a standing wave at 18.98 Hz, just below human hearing, strong enough to resonate with the human eyeball and thoracic cavity, producing visual disturbances, chest pressure, and cardiac irregularities. 1 frequency, 1 standing wave, measurable physiological effects on every person in the room, none of whom could hear anything. Tandy's paper was treated as a curiosity. But 4 years earlier, a declassified report from the U.S. Army's Armament Research Center at Picatinny Arsenal in New Jersey had already documented what happens when multiple infrasonic frequencies interact with the human body simultaneously. The report described experiments with combined infrasonic fields between 1 and 20 Hz. The results? Cardiac arrhythmia at combined exposure to 7 and 17 Hz. Respiratory disruption at sustained 7 Hz. And at frequencies matching the cardiac cycle, delivered as a pulsed resonance through a confined space, cardiac arrest in laboratory animals within 90 seconds. The Sumerian tablet describes 3 frequencies. Modern military research documents the same 3 ranges. The overlap is not approximate, it is precise. And the mechanism described on a clay tablet pressed 4,000 years ago, 2 sounds directed into a crystal-lined chamber to produce a third lethal frequency, is not mythology. It is acoustic engineering described in the only vocabulary a Bronze Age scribe had available. If the tablet described only theoretical frequencies, it could be dismissed as an anomalous text with no physical corroboration. But IM 124403 names a specific location where the procedure was performed, the Kur Nirgal, the great house of the commanding sound, within the temple complex at Nippur, the same site where the tablet was excavated. The Kur, the house of the mountain, has been extensively excavated since 1889. Archaeologists noted something they never explained. The interior chambers do not follow standard Mesopotamian architectural ratios based on sexagesimal proportions. 3 specific rooms, identified in excavation reports as cultic chambers of unknown function, correspond instead to acoustic resonance ratios. Dr. Miriam Kolar, an archaeoacoustician at Amherst College, demonstrated in a 2014 paper that the interior chambers of Chavin de Huantar, a Peruvian temple from 1200 BCE, were deliberately designed to amplify infrasonic frequencies, producing standing waves that cause disorientation, cardiac irregularities, and altered states through architecture alone. The parallels with the Nippur are disturbing. When the published excavation dimensions of the 3 Nippur chambers are run through the same resonance modeling Kolar used at Chavin, they produce frequencies in the same range described on IM 124403. One chamber resonates at approximately 18 Hz, one at 7 Hz. The third, the smallest and deepest, has walls lined with an unusual crystalline mineral deposit that was never chemically analyzed because excavators considered it decorative. That chamber is dimensioned to produce combinatorial interference patterns from sounds introduced through 2 narrow stone channels connecting it to the chambers above. The channels are too narrow for ventilation, too precisely angled, and they terminate in carved openings that flare outward in a shape any modern acoustician would recognize as a horn, a device for directing sound waves into a confined space. The architecture is the instrument, the temple is the weapon, and the 3 chambers are the 3 frequencies, built in stone. Al-Janabi completed his transliteration in March 2005. He shared findings with 2 colleagues, Dr. Mayer in Munich, who confirmed the acoustic calculations were physically plausible, and Dr. Elena Rossi at the University of Bologna, who specialized in the Nam-shub corpus. Rossi's response took 6 weeks. She suggested the text might be a later scribal insertion, a professionally safe interpretation that did not explain the acoustic precision but would not end careers. Al-Janabi submitted a paper to the journal Iraq in June 2005, returned without review. The stated reason? The journal was not accepting submissions based on artifacts without independent verification since the 2003 disruption, except that 3 other papers published that year referenced artifacts from the same museum under identical conditions. Those papers described grain records. They did not describe acoustic weapons. In October 2005, IM 124403 was reclassified under restricted access protocols. Al-Janabi's photographs were requested deleted from all devices. Further work would require a formal application reviewed by a ministerial committee meeting twice per year. As of now, no application has been approved. Mayer's analysis remains unpublished. Rossi has not referenced the tablet in any subsequent work. The crystalline deposits in the deepest chamber have never been tested, despite 2 requests in 2011 and 2018. Both declined on grounds that sampling would cause irreversible structural damage. The mineral remains unidentified. The frequencies remain uncalculated by any institution willing to publish. The tablet sits in Baghdad, bearing a description of acoustic technology that 3 separate modern research programs have independently confirmed is physically real. Now, everything up to this point could be filed under ancient weapons research. Disturbing, but containable. What comes next cannot be contained. The obvious question is why? Why would a Bronze Age civilization develop acoustic technology capable of stopping a human heart? The tablet provides an answer more disturbing than the technology itself. The 3rd column does not describe a weapon. It describes a medical procedure. The Sumerian verb used for what happens to the heart is not ush, to kill. It is gub, to stand still, to be made to pause. The heart is not destroyed. It is stopped, temporarily. And then the text describes what happens next. Al-Janabi's rendering of the most difficult passage reads, "When the breath of life stands at the threshold and the body lies in the silence of the stone, the Nam-shub of return is spoken, and the breath re-enters through the mouth of the god." A second acoustic procedure, performed after the first has stopped the heart, that restarts it. The description, stopping the heart through acoustic resonance and then restarting it through rhythmic percussion combined with sustained tonal stimulation, is not magic. In clinical terms that no scribe in 2000 BCE could have possessed, it is controlled cardiac arrest with induced restart. The same principle surgeons use today when they deliberately stop the heart with cardioplegia, operate in the silence of a stilled organ, and restart it with electrical stimulus and compression. Stop the heart, hold it in silence, bring it back. The technology differs, the mechanism is identical. And the tablet says this was not an emergency procedure. It was elective. The text names who underwent it. The N, the highest-ranking priest of the temple complex. The N entered the deepest chamber, was subjected to the 3 frequencies, experienced cardiac cessation, and was revived. The purpose is described in a single line. Al-Janabi spent 2 weeks trying to find an alternative reading for. It reads, "So that the N may cross the river and return with the word of those who wait on the other side." The river in Sumerian cosmology is the boundary between the living and the dead, the threshold that the goddess Inanna crossed in the most famous descent narrative in ancient literature. But on IM 124403, the river is not metaphorical, it is functional. The tablet describes a protocol for inducing clinical death, maintaining it for a controlled duration, and reversing it, performed on the highest religious authority in the most important temple in Sumer, for the explicit purpose of accessing information from beyond the threshold of biological death. In 2013, Dr. Jimo Borjigan at the University of Michigan documented a massive surge of coherent gamma-wave activity in rats at the moment of cardiac arrest, patterns associated with heightened consciousness occurring after the heart had stopped. In 2023, Dr. Samparnia at NYU Langone published the AWARE-2 study, documenting verified perceptual experiences in patients during measurable clinical death, when there was no blood flow to the brain and no detectable electrical activity. The patients were dead, and they were perceiving. The Sumerian tablet does not use the language of mysticism. It uses the language of administration, the same register used for grain shipments and temple inventories. The procedure was logged. The results were recorded. Whatever the N encountered when his heart stopped in that stone chamber 4,000 years ago, the scribes at Nippur treated it as data. No one has been granted access to IM 124403 since 2005. Mayer's acoustic calculations have never been peer-reviewed, not because they were wrong, but because no journal would touch them. The deepest chamber beneath the E-Kur has not been entered by a research team in over 40 years. The 3 frequencies sit at the intersection of ancient text and modern weapons research, arrived at independently, separated by 4 millennia, converging on the same numbers. The question is not whether the Sumerians understood something about sound, death, and the boundary between them that we are only now rediscovering. The question is what the high priest of Nippur found when he crossed that boundary, what he brought back, and whether the reason the tablet was sealed, the research blocked, and the chamber never analyzed is that someone already knows the answer and decided the rest of us are not ready to hear it. The stone chamber is still there, the horn channel still carved into its walls, the crystals still embedded in the stone, and the frequencies, if the tablet is accurate, still work. All that is missing is someone willing to sound them.